So excited for our second workshop. We are here to talk about when is the right time to pursue a graduate degree. I mean, you are all professionals in your careers. You are all potentially thinking about it or are already in a graduate degree, or maybe you're considering pursuing an additional graduate degree if you've already got one. This is an extremely pertinent and relevant topic for anybody who's thought about more education. This workshop is for you. I'm really excited for you to experience our guest speaker this evening. It's going to be really insightful, very data-driven. It's going to have a lot of facts and figures that will hopefully help you make the most educated decision about what makes the most sense for you. By the way, my name is Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. And really, you've already started meeting with your mentor. That is awesome. Hopefully, you've already set up your first meeting. Maybe you've even already set up your second meeting. If that's the case, that's amazing news. But the focus for this workshop is how can you be intentional about really taking steps forward for yourself professionally. Now, I know that these workshops are on a wide array of topics. Obviously, our first workshop was on how to transition into a managerial role. This workshop's about determining whether or not it's worth it to pursue a graduate degree. But I really want to challenge you that when you're in your mentor meetings, that you are customizing it to your experience for what you want to accomplish with your own career. Because I recognize that some of these workshops are more relevant to you than others, and that's, by the way, completely okay. We bring in really amazing world-class guest speakers to come in and be our guests for these workshops, and that's fantastic. And the ideal goal is that all of them are relevant to you, but I recognize that it varies. And some workshops are going to be more relevant to some people than other people. But what I want you to recognize is that even in this workshop, even if you feel like it's not the most relevant to you, that there's a lot of nuggets. There's a lot of topics that we talk about with our guest speaker that I believe can apply to a lot of situations that you may face in your life. So I'm really excited to get started. Now, one thing that I really want to focus in on, and this is something we talked about last time in our workshop, and that is understanding your strategy, your story, and your state. Those are the three keys to being successful in this program. The most important one, that being state. So physically, where are you? What is going on in your world? Are you having a bad day? Are you having a stressful day? Are you having a difficult time with your significant other? Did your dog just die? I don't care what is going on with your world, no matter how stressful, no matter how mad, no matter how angry, no matter how bad anything is going on in your world, you can change your state in a matter of seconds because your emotions drive your emotions. So what I want you to do right now to get yourself ready for this workshop is I want you to stand up and I want you to shake it out. I want you to shimmy it loose. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. Just go, yeah, just let it loose, let it out, let it go. Because what you're doing is you're letting blood flow to your brain. You're releasing endorphins in your brain. You're getting yourself into a state conducive for receiving information. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, when you sit down for too long, you have diminishing returns on your mental investment. Your likelihood of retaining that information is significantly minimized. So I want to challenge you to get up, shake it out, let it loose, get your blood flowing, because your blood's flowing to your brain. Your likelihood of actually remembering this information is significantly higher. Now, when you're going into your mentor relationship, when you're meeting with your mentor, if you can get your blood flowing before those mentor meetings, you're much more likely to retain the information your mentor has to say for you and to you. But if you don't get yourself into a state ready for this mentor relationship, your likelihood of making the most out of that experience diminishes. So I want you to get yourself into a state. Now, the next key is your story. What is the story you tell yourself? Why will you be successful? I'd love to know it. In fact, actually, if you could, post in the comment section, why are you going to be successful? I mean, if in your mind you think, hey, I'm cool with mediocre, I'm cool with just settling, this program is not for you. I can tell you that right now. If you're thinking to yourself, hey, I want to settle, I just want to kind of like not really aspire for too much, you wouldn't be in this mentor program. So what I'm here to tell you is shoot for the stars, have big, crazy, hairy, audacious goals. And by the way, don't let anybody else judge you for your goal, because your goals are your own. So what is audacious to you may not be audacious to somebody else, and what is audacious to somebody else may not be audacious to you, but that is okay. It's not for you to judge, it is for you to make strides for yourself, because at the end of the day, this program is about personal growth and confidence, helping you put yourself into the best position for you to succeed. So if you can tell yourself a story for why you will be marginally to exemplary, significantly better than where you're at the beginning of this program, that is awesome, and that is where I want you to go. That's where I want you to be. Now, the last part is your strategy. What is the strategy that you're going to do to start putting yourself in the best position to succeed? Now, this program, this workshop specifically, is about when is the right time to pursue a graduate degree. Now, one thing that I strongly encourage you to do, because here's the thing, at the end of the day, your strategies are all about routines. We think about routines both in the bad sense as well as the good sense. Bad routines are, things that we consider habits, bad habits, they're bad. But we typically have a negative connotation around habits just because of so many bad habits we've heard about. But there's a lot of things and a lot of beneficial things with good habits. So what are things that you can do on a daily, regular basis that helps you prepare for anything that you want to be better at? That is what I want to focus on. So one strategy that you can implement is implementing a SWOT analysis on a monthly basis of your life, of your career, of your higher education experience, of anything. Doing a SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So if you're currently right now in a job and you're thinking to yourself, I'm contemplating a graduate degree, but I don't really know right now, what you'll want to think about is, what are the strengths of pursuing a graduate degree? What are the weaknesses of pursuing a graduate degree? What are the opportunities of staying in your current role? And what are the threats to leaving your current role for this graduate degree? If you can lay this out for yourself, it will help you on a substantial level towards making the most educated decision for yourself for why you should or should not pursue a graduate degree. Now, our guest speaker this evening is going to talk about the literal specific facts and figures of financially, when does it make sense for you to get a graduate degree, and when does it not make sense for you to get a graduate degree? And so I think you're going to really enjoy what our guest speaker has to say about this, because the insight is unbelievable. I think you're going to really enjoy it. But in terms of the strategies, I want you to do a SWOT analysis to help you prepare for that. The other thing is, I want you to start having more informational interviews beyond just your mentor. I don't care how old you are. I don't care what stage of life you are in. You can have conversations with people. Just because you're not a quote unquote current college student in a collegiate sense, you're still a student of life. You're still a student of professional outcomes. And by being willing to admit that you're still a student, you can take the knowledge of somebody else. You can say, hey, I'm a student. I'm interested in learning more about XYZ field. Would you be willing to have a coffee with me or a conversation with me? That is a great conversation starter for you to learn more about other fields, because at the end of the day, it's not about stagnating. It is about growing. It is about learning. It is about being uncomfortable and being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So those are the key points I really want you to take away from our workshop this evening. I'm so excited to jump into our guest speaker. By the way, if you've not connected with me on LinkedIn yet, please do so. We have a LinkedIn community, a Ambition in Motion group where all of us participate in it. We can post our questions. Our entire community can answer them or see them or relate to them. It's a really cool place to be. If you don't have a LinkedIn, absolutely get a LinkedIn. If you do have a LinkedIn, you have not connected with me, I strongly encourage it. I'm so excited to get started, and I'm so excited for you to experience our guest speaker this evening. Thanks for your time. I'm looking forward to get this guest interview going. Hey everybody, welcome to our workshop this evening. I'm so excited to talk about how we can make the most, how can we really put ourselves in the best position to determine when is the right time to pursue additional education. How can we determine that? I think a lot of times we're students, and then sometimes we think, let's immediately go and get a graduate degree. Or maybe we're in our careers and we think to ourselves, man, if we get a graduate degree, this is going to change everything for us. And very well it may, very well it might not. We have a great guest with us this evening to talk about what are really the key benefits and what are the key costs of getting additional education. Her name is Lauren Hernandez-DeCrane. Lauren is the Communications and Marketing Director for the Indiana University School of Social Work. Lauren is a master at taking initiative and control of one's life. For example, she recently ran for a public office because she felt like it was the right thing to do. I am amazed by Lauren. She's so awesome. Thanks for being here, Lauren. I'm so excited to learn more about your story and learn about your insights and tips for students and recent alumni about how to determine when the right time is to pursue additional education. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share and see, try to help students understand when might be the right time to go get some more education.
So let's talk about you for a second. What are some of the, just background from us, what are some of the credentials, what are some of the additional, I guess, pieces of education that you've pursued so far in your life?
So I got my bachelor's in communications from the IU School of Liberal Arts at IUPUI. And I started my education in technology. And I was always really more comfortable with numbers than words. I love numbers, they're concrete. You can have right and wrong answers, but I ended up going into communications, and I think that really helped me because communications is more subjective. Your message is based on someone else's perception, So it was extremely valuable for me to understand the art of communications. And this degree, it really helped me professionally, also personally. And some of my professors worked with me really well throughout my whole undergraduate experience and are still teaching me to this day. I got the opportunity to work with some great individuals.
That's really cool. And that's really fascinating. So a couple key points here. One, that you still stay in touch with your professors. I think that's a really cool tip. Could you tell us a little bit more about those interactions, those stories, how they've helped you even down the line in your career?
So a couple of professors I stayed just connected LinkedIn-wise, just to kind of follow their research and what they do. One of the professors that I had, I did an internship with a little bit ago, or back when I first started, and she really has helped model what it is that I should do in my career and how I should act. And I consider her a friend and a mentor, and I kind of hope that I can continue to follow in those kind of footsteps too. So there's been a lot of really great people surrounding me. I was a very distracted student, and so it helped to have people who understood and supported me as I navigated through my undergraduate program, and I'm really grateful for them.
That's really cool. I think that's something that a lot of students don't really realize they can take advantage of, is that these professors really do care about you. And the percentage of students that actually show up at office hours like once, let alone on a semi-consistent basis, is like few and far between. I definitely still stay in touch with a lot of my former professors. They've been immensely helpful to me as I've grown and progressed in my career. I think that's an avenue that not enough students take advantage of. So anyways, Lauren, I'd love to ask, after you got your undergraduate degree, what were some of the next moves that you've made both professionally and academically?
So while undergrad taught me a lot, and I was grateful to have that degree, I did realize fairly quickly that I was going to need some type of advanced degree to get into the positions that I was going out for, something to stand out amongst other candidates that might be going out for the same role. I was in the higher education space at the time, and I thought, well, I'll take some graduate courses in higher education and student affairs. That makes sense. That's where I'm at. I did take a couple courses and really liked it, but ultimately I thought I would want something broader to make sure that I had opportunities outside just the higher education space. So I decided to go get my MBA, and I did this through the University of Indianapolis. And I really feel like this has benefited me a lot, not only to gain a degree outside of Indiana University, which I work for and is great, but it gave me a different view and a different network of people to connect with outside of that. So I did my MBA through them. And it really has helped me understand business operations and made me understand how communications, marketing, and technology kind of fit into the bigger business model. So I think that this benefited me quite a bit to be able to have that graduate level education outside of just an undergraduate degree.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think that's really fascinating. I would be curious, and I'm only asking this because I want to play devil's advocate. I want to like show both sides of the coin here. But in your perspective, were there potentially other avenues that you could have taken to gain that type of education, or do you feel like MBA was really like the best way, most efficient way for you to get that sort of kind of education of like the intertwines of marketing / communication into the business model?
I think there were many other avenues that I could have taken, especially now there's a lot of different types of degrees that integrate into the marketing digital space that I think would have helped me or been advantageous for me. So it is not a MBA is your end all be all. I think it did help me at the time. It was a program that fit into the model of what I was looking for. I did learn a lot of things outside of what I'm comfortable with. I think if I went into more of a marketing, technology, digital type of field, I wouldn't have had that education in things like business law or accounting and finance practice, where that maybe was not originally what I wanted to learn about, but it has helped me especially as I've gotten more involved in the political side with some of the treasury positions, that I wouldn't have had the education in had I not done it. So it is not your end all be all. And I, encourage anybody who's interested in going in for other graduate degrees to do that. It's just what worked for me in my path.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. That's interesting. How do you currently leverage a lot of that information that you learned both from your undergraduate and graduate degrees today?
So I use my education in communications daily. I mean, that's something that even just to work and talk to other people is something that I use every single day, to a point where I actually didn't even realize what a value it was until I kind of looked back and saw the different types of elements that I was using from that education. And the thing that I learned the most in my MBA program, and this is going to be something that's not actually book related, was how to work with a variety of different types of people. And in my program, I had the opportunity to work with some international students and people with much different backgrounds than me. And those group projects, they can be a pain. I know everybody kind of dreads a group project, but ultimately it is what the world is one big group project. And you have to find the strengths in other people in how do we come together to make this product, this show, this presentation, the best that it can be. And I think that's where the strengths of my undergraduate degree came into play, was trying to figure out how to communicate with each person in your group, how they want to be communicated in, how the style that they are looking for, to make sure that you have the best project that you can have. And one example comes to mind as a student that I was with in a group project. English was her second language, and she spoke primarily Chinese, and people tended to struggle having her in a group because she struggled with the language. But what I found was that if you emailed her and you just wrote out exactly what it is that you were looking to have done, she could either have it translated or have her significant other help her with the language. And what she gave back was phenomenal. I mean, she was one of the best. I loved having her in my group. She was fantastic. And so I think that working with the communications is difficult at first, but when you find out how to communicate with different types of people, that's what I learned, I think, more than anything, and use still to this day.
Well, that's really interesting. This kind of skips ahead to a question I have later down the line, but now that things have gone very virtual, and I think online graduate degrees have been virtual for quite a while now, and just in terms of popularity and preference for a lot of people, what are your thoughts and feelings about virtual degrees versus in-person degrees? How do they differ to you? And yeah, how do you assess the value that one brings versus the other?
So I'm torn about this, because I do like virtual education. I think it helps because it kind of evens the playing field of everybody being able to, at least if they have the technology ability, to join online, to join a class, to not be limited by transportation or things of that nature. And so I like virtual education. I think you can gain a lot from it. I think we have some things that we got to learn on how to assess how people are doing through the process. But I do find that there is value in also being with people and having to work with people. I think that we could potentially lose a little bit of that interpersonal communication connection that we've been used to in schooling, and how to come together and work. But so I don't know. I'm torn on that. I think that there's definitely benefits to both sides, and the programs that I'm looking for in the future, I kind of hope that we can have a little bit of both. But that's me dreaming. So we'll see what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm a huge advocate for in-person class. I think the network of those that you will be meeting with in your coursework, I think, is such a powerful component to it. I mean, an example of this is a few years ago, I was meeting with a mentor of mine. Her name is Maureen, and she and I were connecting, and we've been chatting for a while, and she said, "Oh, you know what? There's somebody you need to meet. he was in my MBA class at Northwestern. He's also in Southern Indiana. I think you both would hit it off. And so she facilitates an intro. Turns out it was Tom Linebarger, the CEO of Cummins. And I was like, whoa, that's quite crazy that she just would make this intro. And he was so gracious with his time and willing to have multiple conversations with me, meet with me on multiple occasions. And it was so cool to see that happen. And I think the point I'm making is that there can be so much power from those in-person connections you build, especially with these really talented people that are in these graduate degrees. I think the network is so vital. And if you're doing it only virtually, you may not necessarily get to know them or everybody you possibly could to build those types of relationships.
I would have to agree. I think that one of the valuable things about my MBA program was the individuals that were in my cohort, and I got to know, again, on a personal and professional level. And to follow them and watch them grow in their professions has been really exciting for me too, to see what we all have been able to do. And I don't know if I would have had that same exact connection with them had I not been in person with them throughout the cohort. But I do still like the flexibility and availability that technology gives us to offer courses to everybody.
Yeah. You know, one thing I want to ask the audience a question of is, what are your thoughts about getting a graduate degree or pursuing additional education? Post in the comment section. I love to learn because, you know, Lauren, you brought up this point earlier when you were talking, you were saying, you know, when I got to this point in my career after getting my undergraduate degree, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to get to where I wanted to be unless I got another degree. What made you come to this realization? Was this real? Was this, I guess the counterpoint I'm making to this is I feel like I've seen a lot of people, and I've discussed this with a lot of people, where they're in a job and they're thinking to themselves like, okay, I'm here, I want to get to the VP level, I've got to go get my MBA. And they don't tell anybody in their company that they're going to get their MBA. And then they go to get their MBA and they've got it, and they spent the years, the time, the money to get this MBA, and they come back into the office and say, hey, I've got an MBA. And they're just kind of expecting their boss and supervisor and company just to promote them all the way to VP. And then when it doesn't happen, they're like, what did I spend this time for? And I think it's going to come back to your forte, which is communication. But I'd love to learn, what are your thoughts on why you had that belief in the first place that you felt like you had to get an MBA, and what was true, what was not potentially as founded, and what can we do to really put ourselves in the best position to succeed if we choose to pursue a graduate degree?
I think that's a great point. I know an MBA does not mean promotion and VP. That is not how that works. I think that for me, I was in an administrative assistant position at the time when I'd finished my communications undergrad, and I just wasn't fully satisfied with the type of work I was doing. I liked my bosses. I liked my coworkers. I just knew I wanted to try to do more, and I really wanted to get into marketing. I was really trying to get more into understanding how to do marketing. And I did get my MBA. I feel like that did help me get a position that was more catered to my strengths, but it did not set me up for, you know, the highest positions. I think that comes with work ethic, dedication, networking is always something that you definitely have to continue to do in building relationships, but also authenticity with that, making sure that you continue to keep your authenticity as you're going through that, which can be hard. And so I think for me, I didn't have that high of a dream of my MBA is going to get me all the way to the top. I just wanted to be able to get a position that I found value in, that I felt like my skills were being used and that my brain was being used a little bit more. And I do think that it helped me, and it might not have been, and I'm going to say it might not even have been the education, but the perception of the education, I think definitely helps.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And that kind of leads to my next question. And I know the reason why I asked this, and the reason I'll say the caveat first. So I know when it comes to pursuing additional education, it can be potentially a very emotional experience, or just a very like emotionally driven decision of just like, I'm really excited to go to this university to pursue this degree. But from a numbers perspective, how can we assess the cost benefit analysis of pursuing additional education? How was that? How did you factor that into your mind? Like when you were looking at the, annual tuition or the semesterly tuition cost, how did you factor that into the value it was going to deliver you after you graduated?
When I first was doing the MBA program at the University of Indianapolis, I was working for the university when I started. So it was partially paid for by them. So for me, I went, well, this is a no-brainer. If I'm if I'm going to be in an admin position at the time, I might as well take on the opportunity of going and getting my degree. I didn't stay with the university, and I ended up having to take out loans to continue my schooling there. And that was a decision I had to make, was do I finish this degree and take out all of these additional loans on top of my undergraduate? And I feel like for me, it's a family of origin type of thing where education is extremely important. You don't stop, and it's always worth it. And it is something where there are still loans that we're paying off, and there are still things that we haven't gotten, able to do because we're paying off educational loans. But I do think my career would have looked a lot different had I not invested that much into my education. So when I first did it, it seemed like a no-brainer. I was at the university. Let's if they're going to pay for it, let's have that happen. But then I did have to continue to make that decision once I left, and I think it was worth it for me.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. I think one, if you can have a company or your university partially give you a scholarship or some form of just subsidy for getting your education, I think that's a great thing to have. I mean, I'm a big believer of this woman named Emma Kerr. She writes for U.S. News, and one of the things that she kind of did with her cost benefit analysis of pursuing additional education was, what will the total cost of this degree cost you, and then what will your annual salary be after getting this degree? Essentially, she had equated it to your tuition should equal or be less than your annual salary after getting this degree. And if it's not, that should be something you should reconsider, because ultimately your ability to pay that off over time is going to be severely diminished if your annual salary is not necessarily commensurate with what you're paying in tuition. What are your thoughts on that, Lauren?
I mean, I'd have to agree. I think that when I started my MBA program, I wasn't, there's only so much I was able to make with that. And I hope that the return on investment of my degree will continue to rise as I keep furthering my degree. And so I think that that's a really good point.
So how can we map out our education? How can we map out where we like to be, after our education? Or really, do you advocate for that? Do you, maybe putting the question in a different way, is there a way that we can go about mapping out how this degree can help us get the opportunities we want after, or really before jumping into this additional degree?
So by mapping, you mean like thinking
Just
through
creating a roadmap of, like, perhaps maybe another way of putting it is, hey, by getting this degree, I would like to be in this position or doing this type of work. Like setting out goals, almost kind of like where you like to be from how this additional education can help you. More or less setting in an intention or an agenda for where you'd like to go with this degree. Do you advocate for something like that?
I do. I think that I advocate for anybody to write a vision of what they want and where they want to go, and whether that's adding more education, or there are ways to do it beyond education, which I advocate always for education. Try to get your degree if you can, try to go to school if you can, but joining professional organizations, or getting more involved in your community, or finding different ways for you to get to the path that you want to, where you want to go. If that means, you know, a certain level in your career, I model a lot of different people who I've seen. And so I'll see, well, what was the path that they took to get there? What education did they get? What groups did they join? What organizations are they involved in? Do my passions align with that? Is that something that I should look into? And if it speaks to my passion and I go, yes, I need to get involved in that, then I'll map that out. So I think it's valuable for anybody to kind of look at where they want to be and find somebody who they respect, admire, and appreciate, and kind of see, well, what path did they take? That doesn't mean it has to be yours, but let's try to map that out to see what we can do to build us up in our own version. Well, they joined an organization. Well, I'm not interested in that organization, but I am interested in this organization. So let me go join this one. So just trying to figure out ways that you can progress yourself beyond just education. I think for me, I've been for a while, it was very narrow of, got to get educated, got to keep going to school, I'm going to make it because I'm going to keep going to school. But I kind of lacked a little bit of that. Well, what are you besides just going to school? What else have you been doing? What else can you do? And I have a family and I have, you know, other things that are important to me, but making sure to broaden yourself beyond just that point to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, I love that. I think that makes so much sense. That's a really great way of putting it. I think another way I've heard it is, as being said, is more or less the sentiment that success leaves clues. Not necessarily the way that one person's path is the absolute best way to do it, but there's something about what they did or how they did it or why they did it that made them successful. And if we can take some of those clues and apply to our life, we can be as successful in turn ourselves. So I think that makes a lot of sense. So Lauren, for you, are there other degrees or other credentials you're looking at potentially pursuing?
Eventually, yes, because I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess, when it comes to education. But I can't shake the fact that I'm going to go back to school in some way. What for? I haven't decided that yet. There's some certificates at IUPUI. There's one in design thinking that kind of talks to me a little bit like I should pursue that. I've also not been able to shake the idea that I want to eventually go for a PhD program. So those are things that I'm excited about and I'll think about. As for when, and I think that's kind of one of the bigger overarching questions, the answer is there is no good time. There is never a right time. It's never like, this is the time, now is the opportunity. You just have to go for it. You just have to go for it. And then once you go for it, you just start and you don't stop. So I'm going to have to take my own advice on that, where I'm never going to really feel like, this is it. This is the time that I'm going to start this program, and go for it. I will say that there's some really admirable people that I work with that have been inspiring me by continuing they're going through their PhD program, and I do see them as a map and as a model of something that I can do. So I do think eventually I'll go back to school at some point.
I think that makes so much sense. It's one, this idea of change and doing things that are not comfortable causes growth. But as humans, we naturally seek growth constantly. Like, our reasons for doing things that are uncomfortable now allow us to be comfortable later. But the thing is that the moment we're comfortable is the moment we feel like, we get this itch. And as humans, we can't constantly need to be moving forward. And there's something that makes us more uncomfortable. So I love how you said, I'm a glutton for punishment. But I think ultimately it helps us be better prepared for whatever might be thrown our way sometime down the line. And I think that makes a lot of sense for me. And you mentioned there's no perfect time for this. But I know that there are some companies that are willing to pay for your education. I know obviously you work for the university, so that conversation might more be protocol, might be easier, but do you have any suggestions for anybody who works at a company that they think might be willing to compensate them for their education? How do you, if you've got any advice or suggestions on how to broach those conversations, I'd love to learn it.
I think it's just to ask, to not be afraid to just ask, and try to figure out if there are opportunities for you. And I know, I mean, working at a university is a little bit different because they're, of course, complete advocates for education and want you to continue to educate yourself. But there's still, you have to make sure that it works within the organization that you're with, and the program kind of aligns with your goals and things like that. So I think for me, the advice is, you said it, step out of your comfort zone, try to ask, try to figure out if there's other ways that you can continue your education that might not be traditional higher education. There might be executive programs, executive leadership things that they could ask you to be involved in. And that's my only advice is to just believe in yourself and believe in the strength that you have. And if you believe in yourself and you ask and you try to go for those opportunities, then others around you will too.
On kind of the other end of this spectrum, have you ever worked with anybody that immediately went to get a graduate degree right after their undergraduate degree? Versus obviously someone like yourself who got their undergraduate degree, worked for maybe a year or two, then got a graduate degree. I guess what I'd love to learn are, what are the pros and cons to doing either one? If you met or worked or interacted with somebody that had immediately went like right into the graduate degree.
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons to both. For me, the pros would be that if you go right away, you're still in that school mindset. You kind of, you've been grinding it, you know what it looks like, you know how to schedule, prioritize, and you can just kind of get it done right away. But that's not true for everyone. I mean, some people might still have family obligations, or, whatnot. But I do feel like if you just go right away, you might have more of the energy to just focus on your academics and get it done. The cons, it might, if you go right away, that's great, but it might take you a couple years in some type of field to really understand what type of degree or program is going to help best advance your career. For me, I think that I went into an MBA program. I never would have thought of myself going into an MBA program right after undergrad, but it just made sense for me at the time. And if you don't start right away, though, it is hard to pull that trigger to jump back in. I've been out for about 5 years now, and I'm a little gun shy to could jump back into it. But I do think that there's value there.
Well, I think that's a really fascinating point. I think that makes a lot of sense. I know the flip side to it, though, is having that experience under your belt allows you to kind of apply what you're learning in a different and new way. So I know that there's a lot of times, and I know a lot of people that say this sentiment of like, I don't know how you could possibly immediately go, like there's this thing that Indiana University does of, they've got this 3-2 MBA where you spend 3 years doing undergrad and then 2 years to doing your MBA. I've spoken to a lot of people that are like, I don't know how you could possibly do that. Like, I mean, sure, the course load is a lot to do, but from a perspective, you haven't been out in the working world. It's difficult to actually apply it. It's very theoretical at this moment. And I know, for me, before I had started my company, I struggled to apply a lot of the theory I was learning in my classes to actual business application and really what that meant, especially for like accounting classes. That was the thing that like really threw me for a whirl. And then all of a sudden when I started Ambition in Motion and was actually like doing my taxes or like just keeping track of like all these accounting things, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I get why this accounting function exists in this way. It didn't make any sense to me before I had applied it. So I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I very much relate to that. I think that for me, I was going through the program and I was working full time, and I did allow me to kind of put some of the knowledge that I was learning into practice, but not in all the functions. I mean, your example of accounting and finance, I feel like that wasn't something I put in until years later, and then I go, oh, I remember learning this way back when, and you kind of have to dust that off a little. So when you're not using it in real time, there is some type of continuing education I feel like you're going to need to go through even if you've gotten your degree and have those, you know, gone through maybe a 3-2 program, have that MBA, and then are out in the field until you're able to put it into practice. It's hard to, you still retain it. It's still there because once you start doing it, you go, oh, I remember this. But it is something different about taking a course while you're going through it in your professional space. I think at least if you're doing some type of internship or some type of schooling while you're going through the program, that helps. I think a lot of people can gain from real world experience, even if it's at an internship level. But there is, I think, a difference between just the theory of the education and then the actual application of it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'd love to ask the audience one final question. If you were to pursue a graduate degree or additional education, what would you want to pursue and why? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that. But Lauren, this has been great. This has been fantastic. I feel like you've really opened up a lot of doors, avenues, and insights into really the cost-benefit analysis of additional education, how you've leveraged it in your life, the benefits of it, but also the things that need to be considered when it comes to pursuing additional education. Because it's not like, if I get the opportunity, just go, go, go. There is a cost-benefit analysis to it, and we need to assess whether it is worth it. But overall, I think you've shed some really great insights, shared some really great stories, and I think this was really valuable. Thank you so much for being here. For our audience, thank you all for being here. One final question. Lauren, I know a lot of our audience is on LinkedIn. How can our audience learn more about you? Can they connect with you on LinkedIn?
Of course, feel free, and I'm open to messages, or if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm here to help, and I want to be able to be an advocate for education or insight to education, and you know, be available to anybody who has questions. So yes, please feel free to contact me if you'd like.
Amazing. All right, thanks for being here, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. See you.